Oh, okay.
That might be a sign.
Okay, I guess we're starting now. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Youth for Youth iSummit with LookUp Live and the Social Dilemma. My name is Stella Stephanopoulos, and I am so excited to be here today as a moderator, joined by this wonderful group of panelists. I think we've all noticed how social media can be a blessing, but also very much a curse. And today we will be talking about the challenge of navigating social media as a young entrepreneur and young adult in the working world, when we know that social media and these other technologies are now at the heart of most businesses. I'm joined today by Camryn Okere, Madi McCullough, and Jake Bradshaw. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And I'd love for you to start off by introducing yourselves.
Sure, I can start. Hi, I'm Madi, and I am a social media coordinator at Amazon, which really brought me to the issue of sort of work tech balance. I also founded a company with LookUp Live called Mind. LookUp Live, I won the startup challenge, so have been working to sort of build our product, which is an app that helps you to track your mood on social media and kind of uplift your experience with data. So I'm excited to talk today and great to meet you.
I can go next. We're waiting to see. We're waiting for, usually to see who speaks first. So my name is Jake. I'm a recent graduate of Queen's University. I studied politics, philosophy, and economics, and have been, advocating and working in the mental health space for about 4 years now. And I'm working full-time at a mental health company in sales. And then, my side job is the Social Reset, which is an organization that I co-founded in January. And our mission is to empower individuals to redefine their relationship with social media.
Thanks so much for that, Jake. I can go next. My name is Camryn. Super excited to be here. I get really excited just talking about digital platforms and design in general. So when Stella and Susan talked about this panel, I got super excited. Normally, I run a social impact initiative that helps small businesses navigate the pandemic. As many of you probably seen, small businesses in your area probably were really struggling over the last year and a half, and a lot of that really ends up being digital transformation. So a lot of the work we're doing is how do we get businesses on social media, promoting their products, utilizing other different digital platforms and software just to market their products and create more efficient operations. Back to you, Stella.
Thanks, Camryn, and thank you all for introducing yourselves. So as young founders, how have you all navigated the challenges of starting something of your own, especially that's required the use of social media? And anyone can go ahead and take this question.
I'm happy to start. I think it's a really difficult conundrum, especially because it sounds like all of our sort of products and businesses are surrounding digital well-being. But your audience is also on social media, and there is an urge to almost not want to engage, but you need to kind of connect with the community. So I think I've struggled to craft a tone that really resonates and also not play into some of the attention economy tactics that are really manipulative, so that we're not, let's say, posting really polarizing things or things that kind of beckon engagement in ways that are destructive to the people we ultimately want to attract and improve their usage.
Definitely. Do either of you guys want to speak to that question as well? Like how it's been the experience of navigating social media as being a young founder and any difficulties that you've faced?
I can go, Stella. I think a huge thing for me has been just how we quantify success. Oftentimes in social media, it's so easy, whether it's the amount of followers, the amount of likes, etc. And for my business especially, we're constantly focusing on the likes and followers of all the other businesses that we help. So for us, when people go and find us on social media, it's like, we don't have that many followers, we don't have all this other stuff going on, but it's also just because our work is helping so many other people within that. But then when businesses are kind of coming to us and you're like, wait, well, trust and credibility, why don't you have millions of followers? Why aren't you verified, etc.? It's then so much of like showing people different ways we can still prove that you're like credible, etc. So I think it's definitely been hard and just like reaching different goals when for often businesses like, let's reach like 1,000 followers. Is it like, does that actually matter if it's converting to sales? Does it actually matter if there are people that are really involved in your community? So I think a huge thing for me has just been realizing sometimes like a number is a number and that doesn't really justify like what you've done or even like your worth at times. It's definitely, there's so much more. And especially when you're running a business, 1,000 things are happening behind the scenes. So being able to like constantly remind yourself of like, what are your actual goals per quarter, and what are not some of these like goals that maybe society has set for us, and like here's what success looks like in a way that may actually not quantify your growth.
Right. So it seems like just putting that a bit into perspective and recognizing that there's so many other metrics that can qualify as something being successful rather than your social media presence. And I think that's something that's really difficult to put into perspective as we're now in the age of influencers and people on TikTok and people our age or younger who are now rising to fame from their usage of social media. So I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about kind of this like influencer economy that we're in and how you've seen that impact people's mental health. As we already know, social media isn't super great for our own well-being, but we're in this strange time now where we're also seeing a lot of benefits that social media is providing, kind of launching people's careers.
Definitely. I think influencing has gotten a lot of people excited just because it's so many different things where people can be passionate about promoting products they already have in their homes. They're already so excited just to kind of share with their friends. I think one of the big things that oftentimes when there's ever just like, here's something where it's like really quickly your life can change and all of a sudden you have all this money, it's almost a little bit scary. Like you hear all the stories about anyone who's won the lotto and it's like, life was great for 4 months and then we lost all the money. We don't know what's going on. It kind of gets crazy. So I think even kind of thinking back within that, where I think there's all these really flashy and really exciting aspects of like running a business, working for yourself, being able to like go through your day-to-day life and promote things that you're continuously doing. But I also think on the other hand, finding that balance was still just like, wait, what if in even like today's world, like cancel culture, what if you say something wrong and all of a sudden like your platform you can no longer use and you've either like not finished school or done other things, having other plans in that I think is definitely something to discuss and thinking about in a more like holistic way, just because constantly putting yourself in the public eye is really challenging. Like we've seen all this stuff with Britney Spears, etc. Like it seems like a really stressful life of being tracked by all these different people, whether it's just like going out to dinner and having all these people come up to you. Like first it probably is so exciting and such an exciting experience. We're like, you know me from here, etc. But then when you're just trying to enjoy a meal with your family and all these people are coming up to you, it creates such a hectic environment. I can only imagine that. So I think definitely when we begin to think about influencing, thinking about it, one, is it something that's here to stay or is it something that we're seeing on the rise right now? I think we're still kind of figuring that out. Every company is figuring out, should we be investing? Should we not be? Are we going back to traditional marketing? Is this something that's here to stay? So it's kind of taking it in a way where it's like, let's look at it holistically. Let's figure out what the pros and cons are. And then definitely I think the long-term aspect of this, I know we're seeing so many influencers now where either they're having children, et cetera. And like now the big question is like, should my children be in the public eye? Like you see, I know like Gigi Hadid, it's like constantly whenever I see her baby, it's like an emoji over the baby's head. And then we have other influencers where it's like, my baby is wearing X, Y, and Z, like let me sell this baby to the world. So I think there's so many different things that people don't consider. And a lot of it I think goes back to safety and just like the long-term pros and cons of this.
Yeah.
Oh. Go ahead, Madi. What were you going to say?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Camryn. I think influencer culture has essentially commercialized your personal life. And so for one's personal life, that's often not a great, strategy for well-being. For brands, it can be, unfortunately, kind of a great opportunity. And so there's this tough kind of ethical conundrum That being said, I work with influencers a lot, and I read a statistic that actually the most successful influencer campaigns tend to be with micro influencers as opposed to some of these more generalized lifestyle influencers like the Kylie Jenners, like the Charli D'Amelio's, which I think is actually great because some of these people who are more niche and who you might actually be able to target your users or your audience, you might be able to target those people better and hopefully contribute to a type of influencing that seems more healthy and sustainable.
That's a great point. Also, before we continue this part of our conversation, we have another panelist that just joined. We were having some technical difficulties beforehand. So Snehita, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Apologies, my Zoom was acting up. It was a very bad time for it to act up, but that's just how things go. So hi, I'm Snehita. It's great to be here. Thank you guys for having me. I recently graduated from Carnegie Mellon with a degree in statistics, and I recently founded a company last year called Intra, also the student community, where we basically helped college students with socializing, collaborating, getting the resources they really need during the pandemic, and we're kind of branching out to other companies right now. So that's what I do. Sorry, let's continue the panel. I don't want to take up too much from this.
Well, thank you so much for introducing yourself. We were just talking about the rise of the influencer economy, what it's like for brands interacting with these influencers, and Madi was discussing the use of micro influencers, but let's assume that social media is here to stay and it's just going to skyrocket. What are some healthy habits that we can adopt when interacting with these social platforms as either a young adult who is an entrepreneur and is relying on the usage of social media to really spread brand awareness, or even just being a young adult and growing up with social media? Like, what are some things we can do now to engage with these platforms in a more healthy way?
I can maybe start with that. I think in my mind and in our experience, we ran a campaign in August where we had people pledge to spend less time on social media and do a little bit of a detox, which I think that space can help when it comes to reflecting on your relationship with social media. And so what I would say, there's kind of two different things to think about. The first, I think, is being really intentional and reflecting on your relationship with social media. And the second thing that I would say is there's some practical tips that you can do. And in terms of being intentional and taking the time to reflect, I encourage people to think about, number one, how social media makes you feel, and writing it down. You know, we all, maybe sometimes social media makes us feel excited, interested, engaged, and there's other times where it makes us feel anxious. And so writing that down and having that somewhere where you're checking in with how you're feeling on social media on a regular basis, I think is really important. The second element of that is writing down why you use different social media platforms. And the reason that this is helpful, I think, is because if you can reflect on the purpose behind why you're using the platforms, it's a little bit easier for you to determine when you may be in the grips of the mindless scrolling that all of us do. And if you're able to say, okay, I use Instagram for this specific purpose, it might be easier for you to snap out of it. The second thing that I would say in terms of practical tips, there's a lot of things that you can do to manage your notifications and, set time limits on your apps. There's now a new update it's in the newest iOS on Apple. I'm not sure how it works with Android, but it allows you to create different modes. So there's something called focus mode where you can turn off all of your notifications for the day. And that's something that's been really helpful for me, because that way you're checking the apps when you want to check them, not when they want you to check them. And to me, that's been really helpful. So those are my kind of quick thoughts.
Following off of Jake, I think one thing that I've also seen is just being authentic on social media. I think oftentimes there's like so much pressure to be fitting into like certain different groups within that, whether it was like 2 years ago where you're like every girl using the same Lightroom filter or whatever it may be. But I think even what we've seen now, just like the emergence of TikTok, you see all of these different niches and through people that are like truly being themselves. Like I've seen the weirdest things and I'm like, that's a bit of me or whatever's going on. And I feel like we've seen like the people that are really being like championed on these apps, they're doing it because, or they're being kind of recognized for being 100% themselves within that. And I know as this kind of like creator network grows and more people are like engaging and posting things, like we've seen with TikTok, like anyone can blow up and they're just blowing up from being who they are, saying what they believe, etc. I know that really hasn't transferred yet to Instagram, but I think something that's really important is being authentic, and then the right people are going to accept you for that, and the other ones we may not need them. But I think another thing, even with Jake's point about just like the endless scrolling, like holding ourselves accountable, I think so much early on is kind of thinking about how many hours there actually is in the day and what needs to get accomplished, and really holding yourselves accountable where it's like, yes, I may spend X amount of, minutes or hours like doing that, but especially if you're an entrepreneur, it's like that same amount of hours that I spent on TikTok, I could have been using that to be networking. I could have been using that to responding to, customer service requests. I could have been using that to learn how to code so that I no longer have to pay this person to do it. So constantly thinking about it in a way of like give and take and really holding yourselves accountable, like every hour, especially when you're an entrepreneur or you're working for a big company, like there's things to be done. Obviously there's rest that needs to happen, but when you're thinking about it, it's like, wait, if I've calculated all the hours I've used on TikTok this week, I literally could have built a whole different like program or platform. That's crazy. So I think definitely considering all of those things and holding yourself accountable and being authentic are two main points I would stress.
These are all really great points and great advice. I think going off of something that Jake said, like the way that Apple's new update has been released, having your phone on focus mode, really managing your notifications. Do you think there's also a way that we can curate maybe our Facebook feed or our Instagram feed and still be able to use these platforms and enjoy them while making sure that we're bringing in content into our headspace, into our environment that's going to uplift us instead of getting the short end of the stick and falling victim to a lot of the mental health issues that can arise from endlessly scrolling on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram? Is there a way where we can keep the platform, but just put better content on it?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Jake said. And I think that really kind of builds some of the practical tips. This is actually kind of the mission of the app that I'm working on, which is to help you kind of tie the types of things that you're looking at to certain emotions and have that information to improve your use. But I do know off the top of my head that I've done small scale, like 5 interviews, studies, and have read that interest-based social medias are generally creating more positive emotion than ones that are more socially based. So ones like Pinterest and Reddit at times, I don't know about Reddit, it's kind of crazy out there. But I think that, trying to focus on particular interests, like if you're an art person, following those types of accounts, looking at them, I don't want to say too much, but trying to be mindful to almost train the algorithm that these are the types of things that you want to receive more often. But end of the day, I think a really systemic change would require like legislative action because the algorithms are so focused on certain profit incentives.
I think it's also really helpful. I mean, Instagram, Facebook, they can still be pretty educational. I follow a lot of entrepreneurs on Instagram. I mean, be careful about which ones you follow. I think a lot of them, I feel like you're an entrepreneur. I feel like you can put yourself down a lot too. And you're like, why aren't I being as successful as this person? Like, it seems like they're younger than me. They're the same age, same kind of idea. Like, why aren't I doing as good as them? So I think it's really important who you choose to follow. Like, yes, follow your friends, follow your family, whoever you want, but follow some educational ones too. Like, some people talk about mental health. Some people talk about how to grow your business, do all those. Also just because social media was such a big way for us all to connect during the pandemic, I feel like it's really hard for us to get out of that. But I think if social media is a really big part of your business, you can separate the time that you're working on it for your business apart from when you're doing it just for fun, like before bed. Like, I know you're not supposed to, but I know we all do. So like separate that time so you can actually figure out like what is productive and what is not productive. And like Jake said, the focus mode, There's also this app called you can plant trees, like virtual trees, with the amount of time you turn off your phone. And that's a really good motivator, because if you turn on your phone, the plants die. It just makes you a little bit sad. So it gives you like a little bit of an incentive. So I definitely recommend something like that too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's called Forest, and also once you plant a certain number of trees, it plants a real tree in the world. So that's an extra cool thing. Sorry, Camryn.
No worries. I wanted to say as well, once we're kind of seeing some of the different emotions, whether you're scrolling through Instagram, it's like, wait, like that really made me angry, that really made me sad, etc. Being able to then take like the actionable step to remove it. Like I know there's so many different people that I've been following, because it's like, oh, well, like, you know, I went to elementary school with them or whatever. It's like, I actually really don't need to know what's going on in your life, and what you're posting is really not contributing, or it's making me sad or upset or who knows what. And being able to like actively, like, whether it's muting them, but also even just taking this up to be like unfollow. Like, I really don't need to see this. This isn't something that's adding to my life at all. And I think just holding yourself accountable, because there's so many things where I'm like, oh, well, you know, maybe it'll be different tomorrow, or maybe they'll post something, or let's just see what's going to happen next. And it's like, actually, we don't really need that. And taking like the actionable step to be like, no more, creating a plan to kind of just change it.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a spring cleaning, but for your accounts, like your digital spring cleaning, getting rid of the people that you don't necessarily need to follow on your Instagram, Facebook, whatever it may be. I want to pivot a little bit and talk more about the relationship between mental health and like starting your own venture. So do you guys think that there is this idea out there that young entrepreneurs need to sacrifice their mental well-being to create a successful startup? And if so, and if this is something that you guys have experienced, what can be done to overcome this?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very big thing that happens. 'Cause I mean, you see those stories about, like, you know, Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, and how they spent like 24 hours a day in their garages coding these amazing apps. And now they're super successful because of said time and effort they put into those couple years. And the reason for that is because they didn't spend time with their family and friends. And I think that's, oh, it's so romanticized, and it's not, it doesn't work at all. Because I think we're already going through some pretty rough times. It's even when you're in like college and high school, like you're already doing like the education part, that's already stressful. And you put like this on top of it, and it's like you don't get any sleep, you feel like you're losing all your friends, you feel like you have to talk to your family in forever. And then you're like, okay, but maybe I shouldn't make time for that, because this means that I'm doing well. This means that my business is going to grow. But for being honest, most startups fail. And if your startup fails and you don't have your friends and family for support, then that just kind of creates a really bad cycle. So I think I think if you have a good balance, you do make time for your friends and your family. It could be like a dinner once a week, it could be like going to a movie over the weekend, anything, or like a phone call, FaceTime, anything. It'll help you, first of all, keep the connections. It'll help you keep your mental health, and that in turn is going to make your business better, because you'll be in a better headspace, you'll have better ideas. Being around other people as well, like the networking, like Camryn was talking about, that helps you grow your business as well, because you meet different people, different perspectives. It gives you a better idea about how to better understand the problems that your business might be going through. So I definitely think it's over romanticized, and it should not be at all.
Also, I think a lot of the stories that we get told now, they're often like taken out of context, just because right now we have so many different like resources where, yes, being an entrepreneur is so hard, but a lot of the things of like just like working smarter instead of working harder. Like like if you were asking someone like, oh, like you have to travel across the country like 1,000 years ago, it's like by buggy, by horse, etc. And now we're kind of thinking like, okay, like Uber has this helicopter thing, we could go by plane, etc. There's so many different ways. So I think oftentimes when you hear these stories, it's like, we should be in our basement doing X, Y, and Z, no one's eating, except like all of that stuff. It may be a little bit out of context, where now like we've grown so much as a society where like, one, we've recognized that that's like unhealthy, even though it's still being romanticized. It's like, wait, that doesn't actually make sense for what we're doing. And there's so much more support. And I think oftentimes, like now more than ever, it's like, it takes a village to build one of those companies. You're using your network. It's not like someone's alone in doing that. And I think even with the stories like Jeff Bezos, like when he was young, it wasn't one of those things where like he was doing Amazon, all that stuff. It's like later in life as well. But with lists like Forbes 30 under 30, all of this stuff, there's so much pressure that like now's the time you need to be creating. It's like when you're young, you're most creative, this opportunity, when oftentimes the success actually comes later on once you've had all those different experiences and you can learn from all the things good and bad that you've done. So I think definitely taking things in context, one will just keep everyone more sane, because I think where we are right now is so different than when a lot of like these legends were actually building all of this stuff.
Yeah, two things I was going to say. First thing is that, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is a legend, but in my mind, not someone that I want to emulate. So, that's an interesting concept. I think all these people have been so successful, and you see the impact that success in different ways has had. And so that, to me, I know that we all romanticize these people. In my mind, I don't. Some of them I do. Some people I think are cool. Second thing that I've felt and noticed is that, if you're a founder, if you're starting a company, you're very driven, obviously, and you're might be a workaholic, and you get really invested in the work that you're doing, which is amazing, because I think that's a gift in so many ways. But it's really easy to prioritize work and tasks that you need to get done and goals over your mental health and friends and family. It's really easy because those things are way more tangible than our mental health and our family and our relationships. And one thing that I've done is I've kind of made a list of my priorities in my life of, family, relationships, mental health, entrepreneurship, and career. That's the hierarchy. But what I've noticed is a lot of the time I'm spending way more time on entrepreneurship and career than I am on my mental health and with family. And one thing that's really helped me is spending and bucketing time for family and mental health. And as a founder, as someone who's working full time and also has this job on the side, my schedule is everything. And so I kind of try and challenge myself by putting in different activities every month that I want to do from like a mental health and a family and relationships perspective. So I have goals, which are my work goals, but then I also have activities that I want to accomplish that are just supposed to be fun. And that's helped me kind of shift that framing towards always working, which I think it just happens naturally because you can accomplish a task and it feels like you've accomplished it, whereas you don't always feel that tangible, task driven when you're with your friends and family with your mental health. So that's really helped me.
I'm so glad you bring that up, because my next question was about how do you guys balance being an entrepreneur, also having a full-time job? How do you balance all of these goals that you've set out for yourselves while also taking care of your own well-being? And especially when a lot of your jobs also require the usage of social media, like how can you navigate those challenges and make sure to create space for taking care of yourself?
I think that, like Camryn's saying, it's really, Jake is saying, it's really important to keep things in perspective and kind of formalize the schedule, including things that are less tangible, like friends, family, if that's possible. Specifically, as it relates to social media, I have found that it's difficult because there's this tendency, knowing that social media is so topical and trend driven, that you want to grab on, and you kind of have to grab on. Like if, for example, these past couple of weeks, the Facebook files and the Wall Street Journal, just, it feels like, oh my God, we need to be present. We need to be showing up on social media and jumping on the trend. So that can give you a lot of anxiety. My tip is kind of to reframe that as knowing that these trends are endlessly emerging. It should give you some comfort if you're going to miss some. Like, there's going to be another one. They are constantly, the internet is always buzzing. There's always trends. So keeping the fleeting nature of it in mind helps kind of keep yourself in perspective. And it'll be there. You're going to be okay.
That's really great advice. And one final question I'd like to ask all of you, just so we can make sure we have time to open it up for questions at the end, is what is one thing that you'd like for our listeners to take away from today, knowing that a lot of people tuning in are around our age, young adults, high school, college students. We've all grown up in the digital world. We've grown up with social media. I had a Facebook account when I was 9 years old, which was way too young. So what is one thing that you would like our listeners to take away from today's conversation?
I think it's really important that you guys are kind to yourselves. You can do these goals. You can, because my screen time is super high. It's like, it used to be like 8 hours. I've got like maybe 4 or 5 hours now, but some weeks it goes back up to 8 hours. I feel a little less motivated. I'm just not feeling too great. So I go back on social media. It happens. As long as you're working towards it, as long as you have some kind of, you try to get that perspective, like Jake was saying, like write down how it makes you feel. As long as you're trying to make progress, you're trying in some way, it's okay to have some setbacks. It's not that big of a deal, but just know you can always jump back. Like it's always going to get better. So make sure you know that. Also, if you, I think Karen was talking about following back, how that's a thing. So you just have a lot of people who you just follow back because you feel like you have to. I just had a thought on that really quick. You can do that. I feel like it's still a thing, especially for businesses. You have to follow back. You don't really want to see it. You can just mute their stories and their posts. Like during the pandemic, I had friends who were still going out and I was like, that's not really great, but I'm also having a little bit of FOMO. It's okay to just block their stories for a while. That's completely okay. Because first of all, no one's going to know. You don't have to unfollow them, but it makes you feel a little bit better for a while and you can still go back and undo it. So that's something you'd be feeling pressure to do. That's a thought too.
Thank you for sharing that. Who wants to go next?
I can jump in quickly. I think just wanting to reiterate my point about being intentional and defining your relationship with social media. When we say redefining, I think at the Social Reset, that really means defining what social media means to you, as we do every relationship in our life, and setting boundaries. That's, I think, the most important thing, and it's going to look different for everyone. So, what works for someone here isn't going to work for me, and it's just really important to look after yourself and be intentional.
Yeah, again, I would say balance. We're speaking often from a brand perspective, but I'm assuming a lot of people watching are not brands, and resist that conversation around your social media is your brand. Like, calm down. It's okay to post things that are authentic to you. It's okay to not be posting. The pressure that we feel is oftentimes not real. Other people spend 1 second on your story and keep it moving, and try to like keep that perspective around your use, and also don't I think we talked about a lot of like ways to kind of optimize your social media use. And I want to urge people to not over optimize either, because it's still that mentality of the type A and the perfectionist mentality. So balance.
And following Madi, I think it's also really important just to be your own advocate within this. So oftentimes, like, we're talking on all this other stuff, we don't know what's going on in your life, etc. But we want to make sure that you are the people that actually know that. So being able to kind of say, like, wait, this is really not making me feel happy, or I'm using all this time on social media when I could be doing it towards my business, etc. I think a lot of being your own advocate goes hand in hand with accountability. I think it's really hard early on in your career, especially I know we have a lot of high schoolers on this call where it's like we haven't even gotten to the pressures of like college, career, all of that other stuff. But I think a lot of that stuff starts with your foundation, and even those first few months, whether it's in college or still in high school, where you're teaching yourself like, how do I study properly? How do I create all this time? How am I balancing like friends, family, all this other stuff? But knowing like balancing social is a whole other aspect of that as well. And I think when we have that as like all of these options in the menu from the beginning, it makes it so much easier for people to, you know, build something that is healthy and is going to be successful. Because I think it's a really exciting time, but it's also a really challenging one. And it's going to be one that the habits that we develop now, one, are going to be harder to break later on. I know so many of us have probably wished, like, if I had only known, like, I would have gotten this grade if I wasn't on Instagram or I wasn't doing this, things might be a little bit different. So just being your own advocate and constantly holding yourself accountable, those same goals that Jake talked about setting, those are personal goals. So whether it's a parent, a professor, they're telling you all those things, but at the end of the day, you set those goals for yourself, and it's only really going to be you that gets to hold yourself accountable and be your cheerleader and making sure you actually accomplish them.
These are all such great takeaways. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your wisdom and chatting about this really important topic. We have about 10 minutes left of the panel, so I'm going to open it up to Q&A. So our first question is from Lucia. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And she wanted to ask, have you taken a marketing or social media marketing course? And if you have you guys learned some things about marketing that has concerned you? Okay, I pronounced it right. Awesome.
Yes, doing it every day. We've already touched on this, but just the analytics you're looking at, it can be really easy to forget that these are human beings. And we're like, yes, they spent this many hours watching this or looking at this. That's kind of terrifying. And there's a whole other side of like, how old are these people? Why are they doing this? Should we be happy to get attention at all costs? So I think the metrics are the most concerning. At the same time, it's hard because metrics and data is king, you know, in today's world, and you do need to kind of know what's going on. So ideally, I wish there were more holistic ways to look at this. Camryn touched on this earlier too. Like, I don't know, maybe you're getting not tons of followers, but you have a nice community that engages with your stuff and really cares about your brand. That's probably my hope as a healthier way to look at data.
I think also something that I saw, Madi, that was kind of concerning, or even just like learning in marketing classes, and kind of something to think about in social media. Like, if there isn't an overt product, you probably are the product. And that's something that's like really concerning, especially we have so many different things with like privacy, data, etc. But knowing like, wait, I'm shopping here, I'm getting this reoccurring ad, or people are using my data to then actually give it to companies to then for me to be getting another ad or buying something else. And I think that's something that's really scary, where oftentimes like really easy to think about like, oh, this like benefits me from doing X, Y, and Z being on this platform, but really thinking like, wait, how does me on this platform benefit the brand or benefit Facebook, or who's making money off of me? And now like, who's making money off of me being sad, me being heartbroken, me being angry? And that's something that's even more concerning. And I think oftentimes in marketing, it's like, oh, like here's how you market this pen, but it's not like, here's how brands, businesses, and corporations are actually maybe taking advantage of you, which is something that's really scary.
Yeah, just one tiny note off of that is like, on, you know, when you're looking at the analytics, oftentimes there's these very specific audience types that they're listing. Like I had one down to a very specific, I don't know, like certain type of meme lovers on Snapchat. And I'm like, how do they know that? How, so that's us and we're feeding that. That's a little concerning. And do we need to have that granular of a knowledge base of the people we're interacting with on social? I don't know.
Yeah, those are great answers. And Lucia also had another question. What are your opinions on pressure of having to follow back the acquaintances that follow you? Have you ever felt that way, or the interactions that follow up after they find out that you have a business? So what does that experience look like of feeling that pressure?
I think when you're running a business, you're wearing a completely different hat. Like, I feel like when you're a normal person on the street, it's like, you can be mean or nice to whoever, who knows what's going to happen. When you're running a business, like everyone's a consumer, you have to be nice, etc., follow back to all those different people, just because the experience they're having with you is an experience that you could potentially profit off of. I feel like that completely shifts the mindset. So within even the like idea of networking. I think it's really important, especially if your brand is in those early stages, those first adopters. You want them to have the best experience. Oh my God, I talked with Madi, the founder of this, and she was so passionate about that. I want to be on every email list, etc. Building all of those relationships, I think is super important. And early on in career, I don't think it's the best way to like kind of take the ego of like, here I'm a founder, I can't be following people back. It's the exact opposite. Like imagine if like your fourth grade teacher came back and was like, wait, I need you to present to the class about your business. That would be my most exciting thing, just because there's tons of kids that could be eventually using our platform, et cetera, and just building that relationship, because you never know who's going to be someone who is going to be using your site, buying your product, or connecting you to your next business partner, et cetera.
And I think we talked about it a little bit too, just the idea that you can follow these people back. And then, if you yourself aren't feeling good by seeing their posts, just muting them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we should all be prioritizing ourselves and giving ourselves self-love and self-care. So it's okay to curate your feed if it's not making you feel good.
Our last question is from Kathy. And she is asking, I hear you each speak to holding yourselves accountable, which is a big ask. Having to manage and bring forward so much self-discipline 24/7 does not seem realistic. I can relate to that. Sure, you can sign up for Forest, but that requires self-discipline. How can we help each other in larger groups to manage the constant flow of social media?
Yeah, so true. I think the word accountable to me is kind of challenging, because you're gonna make mistakes and you're gonna spend more time on it than you want to, and that's okay. And so the comment about being kind to yourself and not getting so frustrated when you spend more time on social media that you want to, because the reality is that these platforms were designed to be addictive. And so even if you have the most self-discipline out of everyone in the world, they were still designed to pull you in. And so one thing that we heard from our campaign in August was that having a community and a group of people who are committing to taking a break, or maybe using social media in a different way, is a fantastic way of feeling a sense of community and belonging, which allows you to stick to those goals around social media and have these types of conversations. So I would really encourage people to, maybe find a group of friends, find a time to meet, try to implement some of these things, or try to take a break from social media, because I think that's the best way of supporting each other through this work, because it's really hard. And, we're all here because we care about this, but we've all mindlessly scrolled through Instagram, which to me is super ironic, because I started this social reset, but I still do it every day. So don't be so hard on yourself.
I also think going on with like accountability, a huge part of this is actually just like the effort and taking the first step. Like I know even when Jake was saying like write that note, it's like how many of us are actually going to go home and write that note? The first step about accountability is actually like picking up the pen and saying like, here are the 3 things that I'm going to be working on. And it may not be, I'm going to go from 8 hours to 0 hours. It may be just as we heard before, from 8 hours to 6 hours to 4 hours, like taking time, being kind to yourself within that, but also really holding yourself accountable. I think the first aspect of that is effort. And then the second half is, I know we have a lot of founders on this panel. There's just so much at stake. And if you're the ones that have started this business, it's like, who else is going to do it? So if your time is being diverted and you may not be at a place where you have all these other team members, et cetera, how is your dreams going to get accomplished? How are those goals going to be met? So I think holding yourself accountable in that way and being like, who else is going to do it? Who else is going to care as much as I do about this? So even as Jake said, whether it's your friends but that are holding you accountable and saying like, let's get this group together, we're going to be doing this, with friends that also understand how much is at stake. Is it like Bobby here who, he's not doing it, he may not meet the game week kicking goal? Or is it my friend here who their family's finances really depend on their business? They're 2 different situations, and it's aligning yourself with people that really understand what's at stake for you, or how passionate or how important it really is for you to meet those goals, I think ends up having different results as well.
Thank you guys so much for answering these lovely questions and for the listeners submitting them. We are right at about time. So that concludes the panel. It was wonderful being the moderator and getting to speak with all of you guys about these really important topics, and definitely lots of important pieces of advice to bring back with us and incorporate in our day-to-day. Today, we've now finished all the events with the Youth for Youth Summit, but make sure to tune in to the wonderful schedule that's posted for tomorrow, which will